This is the Dave Stieren Show on KFQD. Dial 522-0750. Outside of Anchorage. Toll free, 888-9090-750. And now, here's Dave Stieren.
Well, as Tyler Chatwood gets ready to make his first pitch to Francisco Lindor at Wrigley Field in Chicago, interleague game between the Chicago Cubs and the Cleveland Indians, evoking a great memory from 2016. One of our favorites, U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan, joins us here on the Dave Stieren Show. Your timing, sir, is beyond impeccable.
Hello, Dave. Nice to hear your voice.
We got a bad connection. Over.
Just as long as you don't have that.
That song?
Song.
No, I don't have that song anywhere near here. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great. Of course, you guys. So I've got to ask you about this because I oddly pay attention to stuff on occasion. There is a narrative that nothing is occurring in Congress and that these investigations and collusion, blah 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 blah, has shut down Washington D.C. And I'm looking at it going, I don't know what the hell these people are talking about. First major tax reform done in 35 years. Spending measures on the United States military. Judge Neil Gorsuch, rock solid on the U.S. Supreme Court. Even if I don't agree with his rulings all the time, he strikes me as a thoughtful guy. Development lots to be sold or put up for lease in the 1002 in Anwar. King Cove Road moving ahead. And that's just on stuff specifically impacting the state. How do you respond to this weird narrative that nothing's going on in D.C.?
Well, look, I'm glad you raised that because you're right. When you talk to the national media here, all they want to do is talk about, Mueller, Stormy Daniels, and meanwhile, we are getting historic things done. As you mentioned, tax reform. Now, look, we got to get our economy, the Alaska economy, out of its recession. That has been my number one focus. But we are undertaking policies on tax reform, on energy, on Anwar, on regulations. Dave, the Congress repealed 15 regulations, including one focused right on Alaska using the Congressional Review Act, and the Trump administration has done a great job on that as well. And 21 circuit court judges. Donald Trump in the Republican Senate now has close to 1/8 of all federal court of appeals judges. These are smart, young, focused like Justice Scalia was on the functions of government, skeptical of broad-based administrative authority, federalism, separation of powers. And here's one other one, more specific for Alaska. We finally have the federal government that wants to help us, whether it's King Cove Road, whether it's Anwar, and we are getting great Alaskans in positions of senior authority in the federal government. Our good friend Joe Balash, the Assistant Secretary of Interior in charge of energy, oil, gas, mining for the entire federal government. He's actually in Alaska for the next 10 days doing scoping meetings for Anwar. You may have seen the hearing last week, historic, which I was proud of because certainly played a key role in getting her nominated by the president. But Tara Sweeney, a wonderful Nupiat Alaska Native leader, got nominated by the president to be the Assistant Secretary of Interior for Indian Affairs, the top federal official in the U.S. government in charge of Alaska Native and Lower 48 Indians is going to be in Alaska. She did great at her confirmation hearing. She's going to have a vote as soon as we get back from the Memorial Day work week. So on a whole bunch of things, we just repealed a bunch of the Dodd-Frank mortgage rules that were crushing our small community banks. So a lot of it is clean up on the 8 years of Obama. We repealed the Obamacare individual mandate. I mean, we are putting up concrete results, and the media doesn't touch it. After we got Anwar done, I had a bunch of the national media say, Senator, how did you guys slip that in? Slipped it in. We had hearings. We had at least 10 votes on the Senate floor because Maria Cantwell kept trying to strip it out, and we would have votes to defeat Maria Cantwell's anti-Alaska narrative that she's always focused on. So I think we're doing a lot. A lot of it's historic. We got to get our economy moving, no doubt. Like the lower 48 economy is finally starting to really take off. And one final thing, Dave, we're rebuilding the military, which is so important for our country. You know, I had a great meeting with Secretary Mattis just last week. But from 2010 to 2016, the Department of Defense's budget was cut by 25%. Let me repeat that. 2010 to 2016. Threats to our national security are rising all over the globe, and the Department of Defense's budget was cut by 25%. We were seeing that in Alaska. We were seeing that in readiness all over the world. Ships colliding with other ships out at sea. Marine Corps aviation having all kinds of accidents that were resulting in fatalities. We have reversed that. We are rebuilding our military. And, I'm proud to say in the last 3 years, a lot of that military spending is coming to our state because of how strategic we are. In the last 3 years, we've had over $1.2 billion of military construction in the great state of Alaska. That's great for the nation's national defense, but it's also good for our economy. So there's a lot of positive things going on, but sometimes, it's hard to break through the media narrative that doesn't want to focus on real concrete results.
Oh, I agree with that. We're speaking with U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan here on the Dave Stieren Show. And, Senator, you and I have talked about weakness being provocative for foes of this country and for our allies. And I just want to pick your brain a little bit on this evolution in North Korea and American relations. Kim Jong-un and his father and his grandfather have waged a insular war against the people of North Korea, and now with the development of their nuclear capability accelerated under the Clinton administration, where it really took root and blossomed over the past 10 to 12 years, Donald Trump has flipped the narrative and said, I'm willing to meet with you, but if you don't want to meet, I'm not going to meet with you. And we're just done. And over the past few days, I don't know what your thoughts are. It looked like Singapore was going to be a done deal. I'm still waiting for my ambassadorship, by the way. Singapore was going to be a done deal in that meeting. And over the past a week or so, the North Koreans probably sensing that President Trump isn't going to not meet with them. They seem to have changed their tune a little bit. What are your thoughts?
Well, look, I think that the Trump administration has done a really good job in this area. What they've called the maximum pressure campaign, which I've fully supported, Congress has fully supported. But at the UN Security Council, we had 3 different unanimous resolutions to really clamp down on the North Koreans. That is clearly had a major impact. With Secretary Mattis, and as I mentioned, the rebuilding of our military team, they are putting together serious, credible military options, which has to be an important component of any diplomatic efforts. And then, Dave, something, near and dear to all Alaskans, but the other thing that's really rattled the North Koreans is the massive missile defense that we're doing. You might recall last year I had a bill, very bipartisan, by the way, that would dramatically rebuild and build up our nation's missile defense, the vast majority of which is in Alaska. That passed, was fully funded. We are literally doing that right now, building a new field as we speak out at Fort Greely. So the combination of all that, we believe, really was putting the pressure on Kim Jong-un. But, we got to go into this with eyes wide open. And this is what I've cautioned the Trump administration about. Kim Jong-un and his dad and his grandfather have a perfect record of cheating. Every single international agreement they have made with any other country, they have always cheated on it. So this is something where we need to go in, even though there's been a lot of progress, we need to go into this with eyes wide open, continue the maximum pressure campaign. And look, I think that the president has put together a really strong team. Secretary Pompeo is already off to a very good start. Mattis, Secretary Mattis, I'm a huge fan of. Ambassador Bolton, I was a good friend with H.R. McMaster. I was sad to see him go, but I think his replacement at the National Security Council advisor, Ambassador Bolton, has a lot of experience. So we have experienced hands there, but, the tactics that the North Koreans use, on again, off again, bluster, complimenting at different times. We'll see, but we need to continue this pressure, continue our own military buildup, as you mentioned, and also that includes missile defense. As you mentioned, peace through strength is what ultimately protects America's interest overseas.
Yep, weakness is provocative. And final question for you, and we're speaking with U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan here on the Dave Stieren Show. By the way, it probably will pain you to know that the Indians had runners at first and third with one out and failed to score in the top of the first against the Chicago Cubs. We talked when Donald Trump took office about his pace. He was almost like in the old Houston Oilers days, running a hurry-up offense. He would call plays from the line of scrimmage. And there is a proposal out there, and I want to ask you about this, about members of your body and Congress accelerating their pace through the summer months and maybe staying longer in August. Well, what is this about?
Well, look, this is kind of a bit of a generational issue. Meaning that I think newer members of the Senate look and see kind of how we operate, and I just have thought that we could get a lot more done. We could work longer during the week. We could stay weekends when we have, like a big August, what they call recesses, which is when we're home. And I love getting out, seeing our fellow Alaskans as much as possible. But if we have work to do and we're not completing it, then my view is most people would want us to do the work. I mean, Alaskans work weekends, Alaskans work late nights. And so last year, a number of us wrote the majority leader in the Senate and held a press conference and said, hey, we need to stay and finish the job. And he actually canceled 2 weeks out of the 5-week recess, and that lit a fire under the minority leader, Chuck Schumer, who's been unprecedented delaying of the president's nominees. Unprecedented, Dave. And, next time I'm on the show, I can just walk you through just how they're delaying every single nominee. And, there's no rhyme or reason to it. You could have someone who's super well qualified, but they make them go through the cloture motion. If we were doing this, the President Obama, during his first term, there would be a front-page New York Times story every day.
Every day.
The press pretty much ignores it. So what we did is, same group of us, a growing group of us, actually, I think 14 senators wrote the majority leader and said, look, we need to get work done. We need to pass a budget. These giant omnibuses and continuing resolutions, it's no way to run the government. It's no way to run the military. It's no way to run any department of the government. We need to get those on the floor and vote those in a way that gives us time to read them and amend them, not, the way we've been doing for way too many years, where we have these gigantic omnibuses, thousands of pages. Nobody knows what's in them. We're given 24 hours to vote for them. Part of the reason that we've run up such a big debt and deficit over the last 25 years. So we have said, look, we're willing to stay and get the work done. And most Americans, most Alaskans, I think, agree with that. Get the work done. And if that also means pressuring Chuck Schumer to not be such an obstructionist with the president's nominees, the vast majority of whom are super well qualified, then that would be a benefit too. But on the budget, on nominees, if there's a lot more work to do, a lot of the newer senators are saying, let's stay here, let's do it. Even though we'd love to get home, we think our constituents would much rather have us doing the work, bringing home concrete results. And so that's what that was about, and we'll see.
Well, whatever you can do to break that logjam that's holding up my appointment to Singapore. I mean, I deeply, deeply appreciate that. And
I thought you were going to be the next MLB
Commissioner?
Commissioner.
Oh, there are too many headaches. Too many headaches. Cleveland fans are terrible. Senator, before I let you go, this coming Monday is Memorial Day. Of course, your ties with the military and your experience and your support of families who have members that have given the ultimate sacrifice. I just wanted to give you a chance to comment before I turn you loose.
Well, look, Dave, it's certainly a really important weekend for our great state, for our great nation. I plan on being out in the Valley, maybe doing a little hiking up Gold Star Peak prior to the services, so early in the morning with some veterans who've done a great job out there. Just remembering our men and women in the military. We got the 425 men and women coming home as we speak, which is great. But, we lost a couple men over there, and those families are grieving. And as you and I have talked about a lot, it's not just the members who serve, it's their families. And oftentimes their families really bear the burden of the suffering and the hardship. And so I just think it's a great holiday. There's a lot of people, young people we've lost recently, some older gentlemen. We lost a wonderful chosen reservoir Marine, Mr. Beasley, who recently passed away. Those are, that's a famous part of the Marine Corps' history during the Korean War, the chosen few. We don't have many of those left anywhere in America, let alone Alaska. So that was a huge loss. But I'll be home with all of my fellow Alaskans doing what we should be doing on Memorial Day, which is honoring our vets and their families and the fallen. And unfortunately, our state's had a lot of them.
Senator Dan Sullivan, always a pleasure. Appreciate your time with us today, sir.
Great to be on the show, Dave, and I look forward to seeing you and your wonderful family soon.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
That's a friend of the show, U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan, here on the Dave Stieren Show.